I don't know about you, but I'm really sad that's going to be the last time we see that bumper. Hey, if this is your first time with us, I'm truly excited that you guys are here with us, and we're closing off our series called The Beginning. If you couldn't tell by the bumper, I'm a Star Wars fan, and that's the way we went. And what this series is all about is simple. We just started at the beginning of the Bible, and the first book in the Bible is called the Book of Genesis. And what we've learned so far, and what I hope you guys have learned, is this, that before anything was created, before the heavens and earth were made, before the creatures came on the earth, before you and I were created in God's own image, before the fall of man and woman, that we read in the first chapter of Genesis, the first verse, in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. And as we close this series, I want us to look at a story in the book of Genesis in chapter 25 about two brothers who are the complete opposite of each other. One, as they say, is a man's man. And the other one, well, as they also say, he's a mama's boy. And so this story is truly about the desires of the flesh. It's about deception. It's about reconnection, forgiveness. It's really about their legacy. In fact, that brings us to the bottom line for you today. If you get nothing else, I want us to stop, and I actually want us to look at what our stories will be and what it looks like. And then the question becomes not so much about our story, but about what will our legacy look like. And the bottom line for you today is this. Your story is not your own. It's the story of faith, hope, and love of what God has done in your life, which will be your legacy. Your story is not your own. It's a story of faith, hope, and love. It's a story of what God has done in your life, which will become your legacy. So if you have your Bibles, would you do me a favor? Please open them up to the book of Genesis. We're going to go to chapter 25, and we're going to be in verse 29, and we're going to go through verse 34. If you don't have a Bible, no worries. You should have an outline with you, and you can follow along there. If not, we're going to throw the scriptures on the screen for you. You can follow along that way. But if you don't have a Bible and you've been wanting your very own Bible, just see us after service, and we'd love to give you your very own Bible. So the story we're going to look at today is the story of Esau and Jacob. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. They are the sons of Isaac. And if you haven't heard this story, let me just fill you in before we jump in. So Esau and Jacob, they're twins, and they're always fighting. They're the twins of Isaac and Rebekah, and so they're always fighting in the womb. In fact, the Bible says this, they struggled in the womb. And when the boys were born, Esau was first. So he got the birthright when he was born. And what that really means is that Esau is going to get most of the money. He's going to get to be in charge of the family, and he's going to get most of God's blessing. And now Jacob, since he came up holding Esau's heel, well, he gets whatever's really left over. And so, like we said, Esau is this big, brawly, manly man. He's a man's man. And so he was the favorite of Jacob. And then there was Esau, and there was Jacob. Jacob, well, bless his heart, he tried, And so he was a mama's boy. So he was mom's favorite. And so we're caught up, and where we begin is this story is that Esau is coming from working the fields, and he's hungry. Now, he's like hungry, and we saw that Jacob was cooking. So we're in Genesis 25, 29 through 34. Once, when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field. He was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me have some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore, his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread, lentil stew, and he ate and drank, rose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So we're taking a look at Esau and his birthright. And if this is your first time hearing this story, you may think to yourself, you know what? What's the big deal? It's just his birthright, right? Is his brother really going to hold him to that promise of selling his birthright? Well, he actually did. And Jacob went a little bit further, actually, and deceived his father Isaac upon thinking he was about to pass, giving the blessing to him. So he actually deceived his father and took and stole the birthright from Esau. And so it becomes, Esau's story kind of just ends in the book of Genesis, while Jacob's story kind of continues. And it's crazy because you think, why would it end just in Genesis and Jacob's continue? And this is how we know. Matthew 1 through 2, and then we're going to go to verse 16, is this. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob. Esau's name could have been right there, but he chose to sell his birthright. And Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. And then there's about 40 generations that pass. Then we get to verse 16 and it says this, and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. Think about it. Because of his hunger, because he was exhausted, he decided to sell his right to be in the genealogy of Jesus. He gave his story away. And I know we're talking about our story and what our legacy is going to be, so it's going to kind of force us to think past our life. And that's kind of crazy to think, because now we're thinking, okay, what is the generation after this generation, after this generation, after this generation going to say about my story? It becomes, what will your legacy be? And so what is a legacy? So a legacy is this. It's what you leave people you're closest to after you're gone. It's what do you do after you die? How will you be remembered? Is it the impact that you had in people's lives? Would that be what they remember? That's what a legacy is. So when we think about our legacy, and then we start thinking about, okay, when we pass away, there's always a will, right? And then we always think, what's the first thought? How much am I going to get? It's about money, isn't it? What am I going to get? How much am I going to get? But the thing about it is your life really all about money? Isn't life more than wealth? Proverbs 13:22 says this, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteousness. And when we read this verse, we're thinking, okay, you have to leave money for your children's children. It goes on and on, but it's not really talking about money. It's actually kind of more talking about what will your legacy be for your children's children. It's what will your story be? Will it be like a story of Esau where it's just one part of a life and then you're forgotten? Or will it be like Jacob's story where it's continuously generation after generation? Because here's the thing we need to remember. Money, while it's awesome, while it's good, and we need money to survive, guess what? It fades away. But what about your legacy? That never fades. It actually continues and it goes on for generation after generation. And here's the thing you'll need if you want your legacy to continue. There's 3 things that you need for your legacy to be set. The 3 things your legacy must have is this. You must have faith in your legacy. You must have hope in your legacy. And most of all, you must have love as part of your legacy. So let's look at these things, and the first one is this. Your legacy must be about faith. Your legacy must be about faith. Hebrews 11:6 says this, and without faith, it is impossible to please him. Who's him? It's God. For whoever draws near to God must believe that he exists, that he rewards those who seek him. When it's all said and done, when people stop and talk about you, what will they say? Will they say, man, she had so much faith that their faith actually moved mountains? Will they look at your legacy and say, no matter what was happening in your life, you always focus on God. No matter the storms of life that approach you, no matter the winds that push you left and right and kept pushing you around, no matter the rains that were coming down just on you, where the world is coming at you and just bringing you down and holding you down, that you stood firm in your faith. You knew that God was going to bring you through these storms. You understood that with your faith, nothing is impossible. That you always looked to God, that your faith was never ending shaken, that you knew that God was always with you. That is faith. Do you have that kind of faith? And when you have that kind of faith, that will be cemented in your legacy. The second point is this: your legacy must be about hope. Your legacy must be about hope. 1 Peter 1:21 says this: through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. Now, faith, when you have that, you have hope. And they actually got to kind of go hand in hand, because you place your hope in God, knowing that he will never leave you, knowing that he will never forsake you. He is always there with you. And when you start doing that, you have faith that in God, knowing that in the midst of your own sin, that God loved you so much that he sent his one and only son to die for you, and that you place your hope in. And then now you have your faith knowing that God loved you so much that you're going to follow him. And it's standing firm in your faith, knowing you placed your hope in God. There's your legacy. It's starting to take form when you add these two things together, when you change your story from your story, making it his story. Now, when you have faith and hope, there's one thing you must have, and this is critical to your legacy. You must have this one thing above all things. And it's your last point. It's this: your legacy must have love above all. Your legacy must have love above all else. See, after Jacob wrestled with God, and this is an amazing story. If you haven't read this story in the book of Genesis, go to chapter 25 when you get home, before the Super Bowl comes on. Go and read these few chapters. It's an amazing story. And you'll find out this, that after he wrestled God, someone came and told Jacob, hey, guess what, Jacob? Your brother's coming to see you, and he's bringing 400 men with him. Ah! Wouldn't that freak you out? Because you know Esau's a manly man, so he has manly men coming with him. And then we have Jacob, who's this little scrawny mama's boy. How is he going to take on 401 people? That's scary to even think about. But, this is what love does. Genesis 33, 3-4. He himself went before them, this is Jacob, bound himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck, kissing him, and they wept. They wept. Esau, who had every right to be upset at his brother, every right to bring 400 men to a fight, every right to see Jacob and bring him down. Instead, we see Esau running to Jacob. And Jacob, knowing he just wrestled God, I just wrestled God, he changed my name. And guess what? I can take on 400 people, and I can take on that manly man of my brother Esau, and I'm going to go and humble myself before him. That's what love does. Love gives forgiveness without even being asked. That's how strong, that's how powerful love is. And here's the thing. 1 Corinthians 13, 1-3 says this: if I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but have not loved, I'm just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. You're just making noise. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith, all faith, so to remove mountains, but have not loved, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burnt, but have not loved, I've gained nothing. Without love, you and I are nothing. Without love, we can have hope, we can have faith, but guess what? It doesn't work because you don't have love. And how do we know what love is? God is love. Well, how do we know that God is love? Because he loved you so much. He didn't just love the world. He so loved the world, correct? that he gave his one and only son to die, that we were in the middle of our own messes, in the middle of our own sins, that he loved you so much that he was willing to lay his own life down so we can have that relationship with God. This is what love truly is. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7 says this. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things. Faith believes in all things, hopes in all things, endures all things. That's what love does. That's what love is. And then 1 Corinthians 13:13 says this. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of this is love. So you can have hope, you can have faith, but without the love, your legacy will not be set. But when your legacy becomes his legacy, when your story becomes his story, guess what? Faith, hope, and above all things, love abides and rules, and your legacy will continue for generation to generation to generation. So it will be, what will your story say? What will your story say about you? Better yet, how will your legacy carry on from children to children to children? And if you haven't thought about that, let me encourage you to think about it starting today. Because I want you to know right now, if you're here for the first time, you haven't accepted Jesus Christ, your story can begin today by accepting Jesus into your life. If you already accepted Jesus into your life, but you know what? Life gets in the way. It happens. It does get in the way. All you have to do is rededicate your life to Jesus. All you have to do is turn around and walk right back into his loving arms. Because believe it or not, God said, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. That's what Jesus says. I'm never going to leave you. I'm here step for step with you. Just turn around, walk back into my loving arms because I love you. That's when your story changes from your story to his story. And you show others that you let God take control of your life. Then you start sharing your faith with others. Then you start showing the hope that you have in God. And then you start spreading the love that God has given you to others. That's how your legacy begins and is set and goes through generation to generation. Where can we start doing this? Really simple. And we talked about it before. You want to start relationships with others? I'll see you Wednesday night with our small groups. Start relationships with others who want to know Christ, want to grow in Christ. Then you start sharing your faith, you start sharing your hope, and you start sharing your love with those who are broken, who are seeking God. Guess what? There's your story. It's beginning with God. It changes you. It changes others. It has a lasting impact. And then you come to church on Sunday, and then you decide, you know what? I don't want to just come and sit down and consume his word. I want to be a part of the body, and I want to serve. I want to serve with the children. I want to serve at the front door. I want to serve by making coffee. I want to do whatever God has asked me to do, and I want to be a part of his church. I want to be a part of the people. I want to be a part of the family. There is your story, changing into his story, becoming the legacy and becoming set for generations to come. Another way is this, believe it or not, you start giving and you start tithing to his church. You start being the book of Acts. We all read the book of Acts. Their legacy has been generation after generation, and we hate talking about it, but guess what? That church never had a need. Do you know why? Because people saw the need, and they filled that need. And that is how their legacy is cemented. The board of directors and your shepherds have gotten together and they decided, you know what, we need the family to come in and be a part of this. We need the family to be in part of this. This is your legacy. This church, these two buildings are your legacies for generations to come, from generation to generation, to show others that you've met the need, that you saw the need, and that you fulfilled that need. And so we're going to put a little chart over there by the bulletin board, and you can see it. And so if you see that need, fill the need. You don't have to let us know. Go up to a board member, go up to a shepherd and say, I see this need. I want to fill it because I want my legacy to be cemented so people know I have faith, that I know God will provide. And I have my hope in God because I know He will never leave me. And I want to give everyone the love that God has given me. You see, that story is changed. And that's what happens when you give your life to Christ. It transforms. You can never be the same again. Remember, we said it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. That's transformation in Jesus Christ. That's your story becoming His story. That is your legacy for generations to come. In the book of Hebrews, I love this story because God gives a eulogy about Moses. And it goes like this in Hebrews 11, 24 and 26. It says this. And this is God talking about Moses. He says this, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. That could be your legacy. That could be your legacy. In fact, I put it at the bottom of your outline. I kind of put a line right there. You can cut it out. And there's blanks, and you're thinking, wow, why is there blanks? Because I want you to put your name in there. I want you to see what your legacy can look like for generations to come. And it goes like this. Matt, I'm going to use your friend's name. Is that okay? Yes. Matt just lost a good friend, and he was telling me about his faith and what he's done. I want you to see his legacy. By faith, when Chris had grown up, refused to be known simply as a product of his past. Chris chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Chris regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of the world because Chris was looking ahead to his reward. That's his legacy. That could be your legacy when you put your name in there and understand that your faith is in God, that your hope is in God, and that your love is godly and given to everyone, no matter what the circumstance is. Do you want to hear my story? Here's my story. My story are of my failures, of my bad decisions. But then, watch this. I gave it over to God. I accept God into my life, and I told him, God, I can't do this life anymore. I messed it up from day one, and I'm sorry. Take it over. Now watch this story. It's the story of God's forgiveness, of God's rebuilding of a family, of God's remaking and healing of a marriage, of a God remaking a man into who he wanted it to be. That becomes his story. When I tell you my story, it's all about what God has done in my life, my faith in God, my hope in God, and the love that God has given me. So it becomes, what is your story? Would it be your story or the story of what God has done in your life? Better yet, what will your legacy be to your children's children? And I hope in your prayer it begins like this. In the beginning, God.